Hi kids, I'm going to read you another story, another one of your grandfather's stories about himself in school during his grades 1 through 3. I was 6 years old. Nothing had prepared me for the shock of being torn from my safe, warm environment called home. We lived in the country, nestled into a protected little valley with a bay front, rolling hills, and mountains in the background. A small creek rustled down the edge of the descending valley and spilled into the bay. On the other side of the valley, a homemade swimming pool sat under southern exposure. In between could be found a grass court used for tennis, volleyball, croquet, and other field games. Then there was a horseshoe pit, barbecue area, pitch and putt golf course, basketball half court, go-kart runs, and numerous other possible activities in our own personal resort. There was rafting and adventure along the bay. Home was where I wanted to be. However, I was 6, almost 7 years old, and it was time to start school. Now, school was not a bad place. In fact, it was a middle-sized Catholic school with very high standards. But to me, it was an unknown monster, devouring kids and ruining the fun in life. And so it happened that I found myself on a cold September morning, standing under the poplar tree, waiting for the scary yellow bus. At the bus depot, a very strange man named Ernie roamed about selling newspapers. A big, nasty boy pulled his pants down. I had known it was vicious out there, but the shock of it was great. Then the bus driver threatened to kick a boy off the bus. Somehow, I found myself abandoned on campus, wondering where the correct door was to enter. If only I could remember it for future use. The day started with a short mass, and then I was marched to the first classroom in the east corner of the big red brick building. There I was seated in row 2, chair 3. The teacher was Sister Benedict Arnold. If only I could remember that. Sister Benedict Arnold stood in front of the class, and I think her lips moved, but I wasn't hearing very well. The next thing I knew, she was headed down the window aisle with a look of vengeance. My eyes went ahead of her to the last seat, where Kevin Dessinger sat, his desktop up, twiddling with something in his desk. Suddenly she was by his desk, and a great hand whisked through the air and landed smack on Kevin's upturned cheek. If there was any life in me by then, it quickly drained out. This whole experience was everything my nightmares told me it would be. As I sat there, stunned, I noticed that someone had stuck my hand up in the air. I think I had done it myself. Anyway, Sister called my name, Eddie, with a question mark in her tone. That moment marked the beginning of my sick years. On that day, and for 2 years, I had every sickness, disease, and infirmity known to man, plus a few unknown. Sister Benedict Arnold sent me to the office where my mommy was called to pick me up. The second day at school fared the same. The occupant of row 2, seat 3, went home before school started. One of my worst sicknesses was a recurring stomach ailment that the doctor couldn't quite locate. Finally, he put me on some pills in the 2nd grade, but I had to be taken off of them after playing Tarzan on my desktop during class. Yes, I was in class once in a while. But my 2nd grade teacher always spotted me right off the bat. "Come here, little Eddie," she'd say. Now she was sweet and a lovely lady, but no fellow likes to be treated like a baby. Then she'd sit me on her lap, so I wouldn't show up for a couple more weeks, hoping she would forget me. Oftentimes it was a nasty cough I'd wake up with that would prevent me from attending school. After the early morning hours, it would always seem to go away. One of the worst conditions I had was some sort of disease in my legs. One leg was totally incapacitated. At first, I had homemade crutches, but when the condition worsened, somehow I got some real ones. On a weekend, my brothers were going down to the bay to play. "I'm coming," I said. "You can't come on crutches," they replied. But halfway down the hill, and just out of sight of Mom, I threw the crutches down and leaped around like a gazelle. My brother said, "We knew you weren't hurt." Without flinching, I responded, "So what? I don't have to go to school." I believe I was highly respected that day. 2nd grade hooky wasn't near as good as 1st, though, because Davy had rustled off to school, and he never played hooky. Only if he had the mumps or chicken pox, or, the real thing. Mary and Margie still made good fried Cheerios, and that was some consolation. They would fry them in butter, there in their little toy cook stove. It really did cook. Don't get me wrong, I did some work with phonics papers once in a while. In fact, my oldest brother Ronnie would ask me, "Who is the smartest kid in school?" Without hesitation, I'd say, "I am." It was that big, ugly, yellow school bus that caused the biggest problem. My brothers and sisters would hustle up the long gravel driveway, almost as if they wanted to go to school. Once, Annie found a poplar leaf so big that we stopped playing the who can find the biggest leaf game, because what was the use anymore after that big one? I'd always lag behind as they went up the road. I could use different excuses, like my coat was too big. But that was a real bad excuse, because Mama whipped me for that one, and she was so mad that I actually went to school that day. That coat fit fine after Mama's instruction. It was because I grew up a wee trifle that morning. Anyway, I'd lag behind like I was saying. Then I'd slip behind the big alder tree. It was located near the top of the slide. From there, I'd breathlessly watch them get on that big yellow evil monster. Sometimes one of my sisters would call out for me, and I'd freeze. It was nerve-wracking, and there was no end of early morning stress for me. Once the bus groaned down the road, I'd come out very slowly. There was no point in seeing Mama right away, so I might cut kindling for a while. Eventually, Mama would come out and find me. "Why, Eddie, I thought you were in school." A different time, I might be found tending my little garden. It was mainly a fuchsia plant that would miraculously spring out of the ground every spring, and I had to be there. Mama took me to the doctor a lot in those days. I guess they suspected some kind of emotional problem, whatever that was. I figured the main theory was that I had some kind of stomach disease, and he kept giving me pills for that. It was in the 3rd grade that things began to turn around. The teacher was Sister Josephine. She was part Indian, and right off she told me I ran like an Indian, with one foot in front of the other. I figured she'd do. Then there was a drawing for a wind-up bunny. It used a magnet to turn pages on a little book. Would you believe it? I won out of 42 students. Another drawing found me the sole owner of a giant blow-up bunny. It got popped by Donnie later, I think. Anyway, I went home with stars pasted on my forehead for good behavior almost every single day, except for the time I whacked Tommy Walsh. That upset Sister Josephine so much that I thought she'd hate me forever. The next day, she acted like nothing happened. Yes, sir, I knew that would be a good year. If I was sick in those days, you could bank on the truth of it. Sister Josephine was a real Indian, you know, and she was my teacher. The end. I love you, kids. Goodbye.